Go.
Yeah.
You're on.
Do we get lead in? Oh, you're talking about just being on. All right, yeah. Oh, no, I knew we were on. So we want to thank you guys for tuning in today. We are getting ready to go live. Well, we're live actually with our live stream, and we're getting ready to do a recording for United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. And I'm going to be introducing someone, which is going to be really cool. He's going to be a reoccurring co-host, and I'm going to hide him until we get going on the show. So you guys stick where you are. Let's get in here. Let's like, tag, and share this conversation until you get to see this person that I'm going to bring, this mystery person. All right, so we're getting ready to get started. Let's do this, Chandler.
All right.
Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online at WSGW.com. Here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Hey, this is Kareem Bowen. You guys have tuned into another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Woo-wee! We've got a good one for you today. I've got someone that is going to be sitting in as a reoccurring co-host. He's going to be with me in the studio. Why waste any more time? I think we need to bring him into the stream right away, Chandler. We're going to bring in Mark Bassett. Mark, why don't you say hello to the audience out there?
Hello, audience out there. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and looking forward to hopefully an entertaining conversation.
Yeah, so I told you guys before that one of the things that I was really interested in doing with the show, I really like to create content that is informative, but it empowers people to really begin to just consider the things that they think of, the thoughts, their ideas, and not only just hang around with folks that think exactly the way that they do, but I think that we become our best selves when those ideals are then challenged by people with different opinions. And so we're going to get into this conversation today. I am here in the studio. We got our producer Chandler P in the place to be. Chandler, say what's up, my man.
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight?
All right, so we're gonna have this conversation. We're gonna talk a little bit today. We're gonna talk to Mark today, and to really just kind of lay the foundation for what we're going to be doing with USG. I almost said something different. USG, United Shades of Gray. But we are also going to talk a little bit about the thing with Joe Rogan, what's going on with him, which is kind of interesting. And I'll just share that, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But we just want to give you guys an idea that this is going to be a format that you can get used to as you move forward and you continue listening to this, that you'll have a conversation that has a nice strand of tension. And what I mean by that is simply that everyone won't be having the same idea. But what we will do is we will respect those opinions, we'll respect our differences, and really celebrate those differences, and hopefully come to a place that we can have some real dialogue. I always say that Mark and I could have been any more likely the odd couple than we are. But I'm excited about having this, and he is someone that I consider a friend. It was a little touch and go at first, Mark, but we made our way through it.
Are you Oscar or Felix? Or is that too old a reference for most people out there?
I just remember it based upon the name. I don't know the names, but just the name of the show. But before we get started in our conversation, and you guys are getting ready to go, I want to share with you each week something that is, just a Black history fact, a little known Black history fact. And I know that this is something that's very interesting. So today we're going to talk about Juneteenth. Somebody said, what in the world is Juneteenth? We heard about it when the former president was going to have, it was Black Wall Street. That was the issue, that when he was going to have a rally there. But Black Wall Street then sparked an issue into other events and holidays that were important to African Americans. So Juneteenth is short for June 19th, and it marks the day when federal troops arrived into Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people were then freed. Okay. The Emancipation Proclamation, we know that it was signed nearly 2 years prior in 1863 and established that all slaves and people who were of the Confederate States were now free. But the reality of it is that the Emancipation Proclamation was nothing more than a suggestion, and those that were in Confederate states held on to their slavery. And so when we think about that Civil War, it was really a war that was based upon, do we have slaves or do we not? And so basically what happens is Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse 2 months early in Virginia, but the slaves had remained relatively unaffected in Texas until U.S. General Gordon Granger, that's the guy, stood on Texas soil and read the general orders number 3. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the Emancipation Proclamation, the executive of the United States, all slaves are now free. And so now it is celebrated June 19th of every year as really the emancipation, the Independence Day from slavery, if you will, for those who are ADOS. And what does ADOS mean again, Chandler?
That is African descendants of slaves.
All right, we're getting this education process in here, and so that is your little known Black history fact for today. So Independence Day, we understand, celebrated the independence of America from Great Britain, but African Americans were still slaves. We then had the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. 2 years later, 1865, the word got to Texas, and Blacks were considered free in the South. So that is your facts. We're going to get into our conversation. I hope you guys are enjoying these little known facts. But I'm going to talk to this guy, the guy that is sitting. You didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
Mark, you're going to learn a lot in here today.
I did not know that.
Okay, so
I'm glad you read that fact.
All right, see,
Yeah.
so this is what this is all about.
Yeah.
Many times in the Black community, I'm gonna be very honest with you. There's a lot of people in the Black community who did not know that. Really, it was not something that they shared or celebrated probably until the last 10 years or so. But it is something that I think that we need to understand. And so when you hear that there's going to be Juneteenth celebrations coming up this year, June 19th, there's going to be a great celebration. Even here in the city of Saginaw, it's always one in Galveston, Texas since that point. But now other cities are picking up on it because it is such a great moment in history to celebrate really the ending of slavery.
Yeah, my old company actually instituted that as a holiday this year.
Okay, his old company now, and this is what I'm talking about. See, Mark, he's gonna uncover a lot of stuff here. For many of you who don't know Mark, I'm going to give you guys Mark, the guy that I met, and then we'll talk about who Mark is as an individual. But Mark was he is now the former CEO of Hemlock Semiconductor, and that's how Mark and I met. And we connected, and when we first met, I can be a little challenging at times. I understand.
I was on trial, I think.
he felt like he was on trial. We had and I'll say this because we had this conversation. I say this to people all of the time. And Mark, you'll attest that this is really what happens. I get pulled into rooms and we have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's something that's very important to me. I believe in an equitable U.S. is the best U.S. that we could have. And so Mark and I were having this conversation. And so one of the first questions that I asked him was, one, why do you want to have diversity? Because that's an important question to me. I don't want someone to just check box. I don't want to be the token in the room because, some system says that you've got to have it that way. And then the other thing I asked him was like, what are you willing to give up? He was like, whoa, I'm trying to help you, buddy. It was interesting.
It was a good conversation. I loved it. And I was joking when I said I felt like I was on trial. I like challenging questions. I remember our mutual friend called me up later.
They didn't understand it. Yeah, they
apologized for you being so tough on me.
Because I became the angry Black man in the room.
And I actually told him, like, hey, I loved it because I love being challenged. And I took it as you were trying to assess whether I was being really sincere.
Absolutely.
And was there any meat behind any of this?
And
that's how
absolutely.
I took it.
And so that is the reason why Mark and I are here, because we had that challenging moment. And I'll tell you what happened. And this is where I say that this is a radio station where its listeners believe in the power of prayer, and we believe in God and faith. And I say this all the time, that I am a conservative in many of my views. However, there are some things that I'm probably a bit liberal on some social issues and things of that nature. But honestly, what happened was I was like, hey, either we work together or not. Oh, okay, I thought he was cool, but I don't. Hey, maybe I offended him. I'm sorry, but that's just kind of how I roll. And and I was praying one day, and the Lord put me on your heart, and put you on my heart, and so I prayed for you. And I remember calling you saying, yo, man, these things completely not to do with business, but this is what the Lord put in heart, and we connected in that moment.
We did.
And so what I recognized was that there is, when we deal with ourselves and we deal with these issues on race and we get caught up in these places, this is the lowest portion of who we are. This is our lowest self. But there is, if you want to say a vibration, but there is a calling and a place and a conversation that is much higher than these base conversations on race, that enable us to come together and have real meaningful dialogue. And we can talk about the things that hurt us, talk about the things that are offensive, and we can coach each other. And when you know that people are in the right place and they have a desire, open to really having a real conversation, then we can do some things. So Mark, former CEO of Hemlock Semiconductor, he's off now doing his retirement duties. Mark, how does it feel?
Feels great. I love it. I decided I wanted to retire at the end of 2021 and late 2020. So I had like a year. And as I've told people, I actually did go through a bit of a grieving process the last couple months of the job. But by the end of December, I'd kind of gotten through that. And I've so far love retirement.
You get that first good night's sleep.
It's over. Yeah, as I said, I've been sleeping through the night consistently for the first time in probably a decade, which feels great. And I enjoy just spending some time on kind of getting myself settled. So it's been good.
So he's got a lot that he's going to be asked to do. Everyone knows that when you retire, Mark, you get busier.
I've had
than
multiple
when you
calls, and one of the things I've promised myself, we'll see if I can keep that promise, is to not jump at anything full time for at least 6 to 12 months.
Well, I got some stuff I need you to jump at, and it's not quite 6 months yet, Mark. But no, so Mark has agreed, and I want to say to those of you who are listening to this conversation, man, Mark, I respect you as a person, and I think no one wants to come into this space, at least with me. I think maybe because I'm kind of a quick-witted person. I'm kind of quick with my tongue and quick with my responses. But you do something different, Mark, because I know where your heart is. And so I think that we can have some conversations. We can have some tough conversations. Before this show started, we talked about probably one of the hardest conversations, and it'll come up again at the end of our time, just kind of getting to know you. I want the people to get to kind of know who you are. I've been on, it's been this coming November 3rd. It'll be 2 years that I've been doing this on this particular station. So many of our listeners that have begun to listen and are part of our conversation, they kind of know who I am. But I want them to understand this dynamic and who you are, Mark. And so I just want to ask the question, because you're going to be answering a lot of questions and giving a lot of perspectives. And if I would say, oftentimes I've been in a place that I play the voice of Black America. And even though, African American, no one is a monolith. So Black folks aren't a monolith. It's not one of us that has the answer for all of us, because we're so complex and so different than just that. And I want to offer you that same understanding, that I know that you can't speak for white America. But when we think about who you are, Mark, who is Mark Bassett in your terms?
That's an open-ended question. It's interesting. I've been asked that one other time, and my first answer was, ultimately, I'm multiple things. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm a father. I was a business person.
You're still a businessman.
Yeah, businessman. I'm a businessman. But at the highest level, I think I'm a person. We're all people. And I think what I've noticed about myself, and I think it's generally true, is most people want to make a difference. So I'm always just searching for some way to make an impact with whomever I'm interacting with. So.
Okay, good. And where are you from? Because I'm from the city of Saginaw, born and raised. We're here in Carlton, so I was raised in Carlton, grew up in the city of Saginaw, Clater, Ricker.
Yep.
You know, went to all the city schools here.
Local
in the city
boy
of Saginaw.
made good.
Local guy. Oh, if that's what, hopefully they consider local boy made good. Well, who are you, Mark? And
Yeah.
where are you from, dude?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a citizen of the world. So I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. My dad was a military officer. Lived in Louisville, Baltimore, 3 cities in Germany. But I say I grew up in Hawaii. So 3rd grade through high school, I lived in Hawaii for about 18 months in the middle of that.
Man, that's intense.
Yeah, it was Hawaii was a great place to grow up, but I was excited to leave because island fever does exist.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. God, yeah. It's
he's like, God, yeah.
Yeah, it's a small island, and unless you love to surf all day, every day, you at some point you're ready to move on to other things. And so I went to the University of Notre Dame. To all the great Notre Dame people out there, go Irish. And then ended up getting a PhD at the University of Virginia after I graduated from Notre Dame, and I actually did a postdoc in Berlin the year the wall came down. So
wow. Okay.
I was excited.
Was that 90?
89.
90.
November of 1989, the wall came down. And anyway, as a chemical engineer, and started with Union Carbide, and then eventually ended up here with Dow Chemical.
All right. So he's had a fascinating career. Sounds like he's
spent 7 kids, by the way.
A whole 7 kids.
Gaggle.
A whole gaggle of kids.
Yeah.
And your wife's name? What's your wife's name?
Mary.
All right,
Mark
Mary.
and Mary. Good Catholic name. Big, traditional old school Catholic family. 7 kids.
Yeah. So we that's interesting. I come from a really big family as well. But Mark, one of the things that I want to talk about are core values, because I think it's important for us to understand, and for those that are listening to understand what drives us, what motivates us, what our core values are. I know that you're a man of faith. You were talking about the Catholic Church. I'm a man of faith, was born and raised that way. So what are your core values?
Yeah, it gets back to kind of what I alluded to a bit earlier. I went to this seminar for a week, and part of that they asked you a lot of questions. It was basically why, and what they were trying to get to is a little bit of what you're talking about. They called it a cascade, but at the top of my cascade was, we're here to make a difference,
right,
and to make the world a better place. And my core value is. And our priest a couple of weeks ago asked, what's your favorite Bible story? And
okay.
The one that comes to my mind all the time and is this story of 3 servants. 1 guy gets 5 gifts. 1 guy gets 3.
Story of the talents.
And I feel like I've been blessed with a lot of talents for whatever reason. I feel very blessed. And what I've noticed about myself is I'm at my happiest when I'm trying to utilize those talents to make the company I'm working for better, or the people I'm working with better. And I think, in a lot of ways, people are pretty simple. We're all very similar.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be a part of something, and we want to make a difference. And so my core values are around working with people to help make the world a better place, really. And that sounds corny. That sounds cliche now that I say it. But
those who are listening, there's a movie called The Best Man, and there was another edition called Best Man Holiday. And you talk about corny. Mine was going to be food, family, family, faith, and football. But no, honestly, deep rooted faith. Another core value is just love. I want to love people to life, and that is the essence of who I am. Now, you talk to some people, you ask some people who know me, they be like, Kareem, but that is one of my core values. I really want to make spaces and places better than when I receive them, and so I think that's a key piece. Chandler, do you ever spend any time thinking about what are your core values, what drives you or motivate you? I know you're a much younger guy.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I know a lot of people my age do, especially nowadays. Like, what drives me? What makes me want to put things into the world? And it's a lot of, I want to make things cool. I want to make cool looking things like this live stream.
It's hard to make us look cool. We're too old guys.
I don't know about you, bro, but I'm kind of cool over here. All right. So what do you love about your life, Mark? Let's talk with these people. We're going to have some deep conversations. But I think they need to know who you are. So what do you love about your life?
I get back. I just am really blessed. And
okay.
I just feel really blessed. I have a wonderful wife who somehow I can be really difficult. And she's put up with me for, we've been married since 84. So 37 years,
7 kids,
7 kids. She raised those kids, she and I alone, but I was working all day. So I've got a wonderful wife who has supported me and allowed, put herself second and me first, frankly. I've got 7 great kids. I've had great jobs that have allowed me to do some amazing things and travel the world and meet amazing people. And I'm just in a place now where I feel really at peace. And so a friend told me, okay, you've worked 30 years, you're 61, just turned 61. You're healthy. You could live another 30 years. Absolutely. It's like you're halfway through, dude. What are you going to do? I'm just gearing up for what I'm going to do in the next 30 years. I'm excited about it.
You're not done yet, buddy.
Yeah.
You're not done yet. So when I think about diversity, Mark, I think of a room that is both colorful and varies in shades and colors and hues, but also culture and the dynamics of how that culture plays out. When you think of diversity, what comes to mind? What is your idea of diversity? It's the thing everyone's talking about, DE&I.
Yeah.
So when you think of diversity, what comes to mind? What is the thing that jumps into your head?
Yeah, I mean, when I used to think about this a long time ago, and I think still it comes back to that. It's diversity of thoughts, perspectives, skills, more so, frankly, than race, color, because at the core, again, I come back to this thesis that we're people.
Mm-hmm.
And people, in a lot of ways, are very similar. Yes, they come from different cultures, and that might be demarked by color of skin or way they do things. But it comes at the core, it's about people with different skills, perspectives, ways of doing things, ways of approaching things. And because I always come back to, and I was actually just talking to him on the way over here, my first great boss, my first great mentor, Brian Keene, who is a brilliant, creative, organic chemist.
Right.
I will say I was brilliant, less creative engineer. But what he had 10 brilliant ideas a day.
Right.
But what I could do really well, I could have never come up with those 10 ideas. But what I could do is assess those 10 ideas and go, hey, Brian, these 2 we could actually maybe do.
Right.
And he had this old saying about, Mark, if you're a handyman and all you have is a box of hammers, there aren't a lot of things you can fix. And so he was this big believer in bringing people of different educational backgrounds in to solve a problem. And then if you extrapolate that to a company, it's different educational backgrounds, different ways of looking at things, different perspectives. And I'm all about when, if we put my old hat back on as a CEO, it's my job to try to attract and retain the best people possible.
So, okay, I get that. And you said something in your opening statement. You talked about ideas and you said that it was more about ideas than necessarily race.
Yep.
And part of me agrees with you to a great degree. Because one of the things that I want when I get in, regardless of race, whatever race I am, I want to know that I am being heard.
Yep.
And so I don't want to just be put at a table. Many people say, I want a seat at the table. Well, there's a lot of people who have a seat at the table, but your mic doesn't work.
Sure.
So I want to make sure that as I sit at the table, that my mic works, that I'm being heard. And then as I'm being heard, my ideas and perspective are all being seen as being equal to, they carry the same amount of weight. They have the same ability to impact.
Yep.
And so I think that that's important. However, it's interesting because, and we're going to pick this up on the other side of this break that we're getting ready to take. I was reading a poll, I think it was a Quinnipiac poll, and it was saying that 80% of white Americans believe that race is less of an issue than African Americans or people of color, POCs, people of color, right?
Too many acronyms already.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're going to educate the people of color. And they were saying that 85% of African Americans believe that race is still a very important part of their life, and it impacts them
I believe
in a powerful way. So I think that's an interesting conversation. So when we talk about what diversity looks like, we also, so I think our ideas become the most important part. But what you look like also matters, because we need some young girl out there. I remember when Vanessa Williams became Miss America, she gave every other young Black girl the opportunity to see that you have the ability to be a queen. And so ideas matter. We're going to be back with more conversations on race in America.
irrespective of anything matter.
Yep. You giving us to social media? Hey, social media, we thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to get into this conversation. I want you guys to stay tuned. We're going to kind of finish off this conversation on, race and diversity real quick. And then we're going to jump in head first, how I do it. We're going to jump into this conversation about Joe Rogan and his deal with Spotify and the fallout and what people are thinking or what people are saying. And I'm going to be very honest. I've had some time to think about it, and that's something that I often don't do, think before I talk. But I've been given an opportunity to think about it, and I heard something really powerful by India Ivory, one of my favorite female artists, and we're going to share that piece with you as we have this conversation. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to United Shades of Grey on WSGW.
Hey, this is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Grey, conversations of race in America. I'm in here with my reoccurring co-host, Mark Bassett. Mark, give a shout out again.
Hey, everybody.
All right. He is the natural here. He's very comfortable. He's casual. Mark, before break, we were talking about our ideas of diversity and what diversity means. And you were talking about that you thought diversity was more so about getting the ideas in the room and less about race. I want to allow you to continue that.
Thank you.
On this side of the break.
Yeah. So where I wanted to go there, Kareem, was, so again, I'll go back to my old hat, which isn't that old, as CEO of a company. One of my big jobs is to be able to attract and retain the best possible talent that we can get. And so if I have 100% of my employees are white males, that means 100% of my employees are coming from way less than 50% of the population. So just statistically speaking, I'm not attracting the best talent. That doesn't mean they're not good talent. That doesn't mean they're not good employees.
Where are you fishing at? Where are you fishing?
Exactly. And so then once we get, and so my employee base should look very similar to the employee base in communities in which I live, or the educational pools from which I'm trying to attract talent. It should be very similar to that. And then once you create an employee base that looks like that, I think it's really important to create a culture in which everybody, irrespective of what they look like, their religious beliefs, their sexual orientation, or whatever, have an equal opportunity to have their voices heard and to advance and grow in the company.
I agree with what you said wholeheartedly. This is one of the things, and since you're no longer the CEO, I'll pick a bone with you right now. This is my CEO bone that I picked.
Okay.
This is my DE&I bone. Oftentimes what happens is, in my perspective and how I see things, is that in places where there's very little diversity, we are seeing, when I say we, I'm talking about blacks that come into that workspace, are often seen as a spokesperson for Black America. I talked about, we are in a monolith, but we're very different.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that's very important to understand, and I see this happen over and over and over and over again. People assume that since a person has a brown shade, that, or that they understand, Hispanic culture. They think that since they have, black skin, that they understand Black America. But the reality of what I often see is that people gravitate to people that they're comfortable with, not necessarily people who are
Yep.
going to bring forth and really push the agenda of diversity and inclusion and equity that they desire to be. And so it becomes like, hey, we have this person, they're a great person, they're a person of color, we've done this, and they're going to come in and do this. When that person is no more well equipped to really engage communities of color than you or Chandler might be. But we think that because they are black, that they should understand that, what folks that are urban should understand, people that are from underserved communities, and they are very two different things. But I've seen that happen a million times. And I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts about that, Mark? He said,
Oh, God.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, again, at some point you have to start somewhere.
Right.
I mean, like you said, I mean, people tend to hang with people that they're comfortable with or
Yep.
familiar with.
Yep.
And I don't know that I have a great answer for you, Kareem, on that one. It's just, I mean, you got to start somewhere, and you got to keep trying to go down the path and to try to move the needle.
And I think that's a real conversation. But I think that one of the things, and if we're talking and you're a CEO or you're a person who's in HR, and you're looking at these things, I think it's important for you to realize and recognize that when you see a candidate that you're saying, we need to add some diversity, and they have the qualifications and they check off all the boxes, and they meet the criteria, that then there has to be more of an investigative question about getting to know that individual.
Sure.
So where has your experience been? If they spent most of their time at Harvard and at Yale and Oxford,
Yeah.
chances are they aren't going to understand Tyrone and Craig, that
Yeah.
grew up, in other areas of the community.
Yeah.
And I'm making light of the situation. Yeah. So it's important that we have, even within those quests for diversities, that we have those underlying themes of, okay, we understand that you come from a minority group, but what have your experiences been like? Do you have experiences that are consistent with those who are from underserved communities? And I think that's a very important thing that we often miss, and I see so many people don't get right. But I want to thank you. I think that was a very honest conversation. So politically, and I'm saying this, I'm asking you this question, Mark, because we don't talk politics very often.
Not too much.
Not too often.
Yeah.
But we're going to be forced
Yep.
to in here to some degree,
Yep.
and I think this is good. But if you were to look, and I tell people this, and I'm not asking you to have to say I'm a Republican. What you say, whatever you want to
Yep.
say. I share with people all the time that I would consider myself in many ways a conservative. I am a Christian. I don't believe in abortion. However, I don't believe that people going to do what they want to do. So I'm not necessarily one who's going to run around on my, banning brigade and ban everybody from doing the things that they don't want to do. I believe that, that the definition of what marriage is consistent with what conservative between a man and woman. So these are thoughts that are very conservative views. I believe that we should all have, I believe in capitalism. I believe in working hard. And so I'm very conservative in many things, but then I also believe that I have a strong responsibility, because when I look at the word of God, and that's the thing that governs me, it talks a lot about social issues and what you do for the least of these, you do for us. And so I have some very liberal views as it comes to social issues. So that's who I am. If you were to define who you are in terms of this world of understanding philosophy, quasi politics, how would you define yourself?
Probably pretty similar to you, frankly. I would say, as a younger person, I was much more conservative, and as I've aged, I've moved much more to the center.
Okay.
And I fiscally, I'm probably center right.
Okay.
Socially, I kind of I'm on both sides. Like, I don't believe in the death penalty.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't believe in abortion other in extreme situations. I think the government should stay out of who you're married to and who you're.
This is going to be a boring conversation. No, I don't think so. Because it's funny because we sound so much alike on paper. But, I've shot you articles. We've sent articles to each other, and we have some different opinions.
Yeah.
And
so the reparations was one.
Oh, yeah. So when we have our conversation, and I think reparations, that was one of the conversations.
Yeah.
As we talk about reparations, we have differing views. It's going to be interesting to see those points of view. But we're going to take these perspectives, and we're going to bat these things out, and we're going to have conversations about them. We're going to switch a little bit, and we're going to start up, and I think that you might begin to see some of that dynamic with this first conversation. For those of you who are listening, Joe Rogan, who is a podcast phenom with 11 million listeners.
He's the most listened to guy in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He has the largest podcast in the world, and $100 million contract with Spotify. Recently coming into the COVID, because of his misinformation for COVID, he's come under sharp fire. But during that period of time, there was a young lady by the name of India Ari, Strength, Courage, and Weakness. It's a song that she wrote. You got to go look it up. Don't use Spotify though. Well, Strength, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Strength, Courage, and Weakness. But I did get rid of my Spotify subscription. Strength, Courage, and Weakness is the name of the song. She began to say that, she does have issues with his misinformation. However, that's not the only thing that is a problem for her. One of the other is, thank you. I was corrected. Strength, Courage, and Wisdom. That's what it is. I don't know what I said, but I was singing. But she was saying how his views on race and the fact that he said the N-word 24 times in 23 clips. Someone put together a compilation of all of the times that he used the N-word. And this was something that took place before he got that 100 million deal with Spotify back in, I think it was 2019, actually. But he apologized. So, this came to surface. He apologized for the COVID misinformation because he doesn't want to be, censored. No one does. But Spotify, said, hey, we're not going to censor him based on that. Then this stuff comes out about, the N-word. And they said, hey, we're not going to go into this cancel culture mode, which we all talk about all the time. And he has now come back. He says, hey, this whole compilation is a political hit job. So I want to take a couple minutes and I want to talk about this because there's a few things that are interesting to me about this. One is that the COVID misinformation was something that came to the forefront as the issue that everyone was having an issue with. But there was this whole compilation of him dropping the N-bomb that had been going on, and Spotify was aware of it because when they pulled those, they knew exactly where to go to get them. So it wasn't like this was something that they didn't understand. Mm-hmm. So, when we talk about freedom of speech, we talk about censorship, and I know you brought up the idea in our off mic conversation. There's a difference between a publicly owned company and a private company. I'm really interested in knowing what your thoughts are
about that, or just Joe Rogan.
About
general?
Joe Rogan. I mean, come on.
I mean, Joe Rogan. Ultimately, and if people don't like him or what he has to say, I come back to. I'm kind of trying to gather my thoughts here a little bit. Ultimately, I do believe, one of our core tenets is around the freedom of speech. Kind of the tenet of the show, people with different opinions, different ideas.
That's what that's what podcasts are.
Right. And I guess he did use offensive language off air, and in
the podcast, in the podcast. Yeah.
So I actually haven't read much about any of it, to be perfectly honest. I've ignore the news anymore because I don't find it to be news. Really.
Well, you're gonna have to do something. You're gonna be because I talk about everything that's in the news. You're gonna come on.
All right,
whip that horse and buggy and catch up.
So, I just believe it's a really slippery slope when you start to censor people and who becomes the arbiter of what is offensive language or isn't offensive language. Because the reality is, with how many people live in this country? How many people are
350 million?
Yeah, 11 million podcast viewers. For sure, no matter what he says, he's going to offend somebody. No, I'm not saying I agree with what Joe Rogan said. I find it offensive as well. But ultimately, it's a free market. And if you don't like what Spotify's doing, you don't like what Joe Rogan says, you can do what you did, which is cancel
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
your vote will speak louder than any of us sitting here talking.
No, and I think that you said it correctly. I think that, and I love the way you said it, your vote, because when you subscribe, that is your vote. You are giving a vote, and you're giving dollars behind that campaign. And so I decided I wasn't willing to do that. So I want to share with you, because there's a couple of things that came to mind. And I just want to throw this out there for our listeners. When I was thinking about this, and I'm kind of like, how do I feel? Because the reality of the situation, I don't know if Joe Rogan is a racist. I know that Joe Rogan is trying to be this comedian, and he's a stand-up comic. The most famous stand-up comics in the world right now are black men. So I don't think that I would want to put myself, on the other side of Kevin Hart, or any of these guys who are these phenomenal. So I don't know how I feel about that. I do think that Joe Rogan understands the heartbeat of America. I think that he took a choice, and I don't think that he said it to be racist. And I agree with him in that apology. I think that he said it to be edgy. And this is the thing that is my dilemma here. Even though I don't believe that he's racist, I watched him on Fear Factor. I've seen him interact with people of color. I've seen him, just watching him what was he in? What is the rest of the
MMA,
UFC? Yeah. So Joe was a dude.
Yep.
But he made a decision to be edgy in a space and use language that he doesn't have the right to use. And so when I began to look at this, I said to myself, do we really want to cancel him? No, let him speak to all the other people who think it's okay, because obviously he and Spotify thought that, hey, this is good business. We're going to give him $100 million to do what he does. And he's got 11 million people who feels the same way that he does, because if they didn't agree, they would leave.
No,
Mark,
I actually don't know that I believe that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because people might. Did you ever watch or listen to Howard Stern?
Yes. I used to listen to Howard Stern all the time because I think he's crazy. Because he's crazy.
There you go.
Absolute sensationalism.
Did you see? They had a movie, Private Parts, about him. I think it was called Private Parts. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I always remember this line. He was at the NBC in New York, and they came in with the ratings, and they were really good, and they were like, people who like Howard listen to him this amount of time, and I forget what the number was, 30 minutes.
Right.
And it was which was a big number. And they said, well, what about people who don't agree with him or don't like him? They actually listen to him longer.
No, absolutely. Because he's offensive.
Right. And so I wouldn't assume all 11 million people listen to Joe Rogan because they like him or agree with him. They listen to him because he's provocative.
I'll tell you the difference. The difference is I'm not a member of the Joe Rogan experience. I was never a member. I was never looking for Howard Stern. But what would happen was he would get honest and a truth moment? I'll be honest. He used to have kinky conversations as a young man growing up. It was like you could sit there and kind of is what it. I'm being honest. And so he would have these conversations that were kind of tantalizing. So you would kind of listen to the conversation. I'm talking about a young man growing up, and so that was one of the reasons why I would listen to it. And this dude was highly offensive. And I was a young man. I think he tells it just the way he feels. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. Right. And I would say, there's a piece of me that is my mom always says, "Oh God, what are you gonna say today?" And I think that's it. I think I love when people speak their truth. And when people are honest and they say what they say, now you don't have to be mean with it, but if you're going to say the truth, tell me the truth. But what the thing with Joe is this, so I want to get back to that because I think that you're absolutely right. And you got me. The sensationalism sells. And I think that was what he was banking on as well. If I am sitting and I'm here and I'm throwing it, I'm saying what I want to say, I'm going to say the one word that, all of Black America gets mad at, and white America is sitting there saying, how come we can't say it either? Come on, let's be honest. That's what the thing is. And so he has this podcast. And so when I look at podcasts, and so I think what Joni Mitchell and these other artists, India Arie and these other artists are doing is what you should do. Because a podcast is where you curate a space, right? And this is what India Arie was saying. You curate a space based upon what you like and what you enjoy. And so I don't think that we should cancel him. I don't think they say, take them in. Why? He still thinks the same. you know, the people that are listening still feel the same. So I want to give them a platform so I know what they're saying. But you're curating a space, and if the space that's being curated is not consistent with where you are and what you feel, then you go to another space.
Go to another space.
You go to another space. Now, if this were a situation in which Joe was in charge of who got on Spotify, then I would say that we need to remove him as being the person, because you can't denigrate people and empower people at the same time. And so I think that's a very different conversation. But I wanted to say that, and then as I was looking at this whole thing, what came to mind, Mark, and I was sitting here looking, I was like, for some reason, the Constitution kept popping up. I don't know why. So I said, let me go to the preamble of the Constitution. So I had to pull it up and start reading it today. And when I read the beginning of the Constitution, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and in order to form a more perfect union, right? So when we talk about the First Amendment, and really this is a First Amendment conversation, you know, you can't censor our speech, freedom of press, freedom of speech. You know, you can't go in and say fire, because why? Because people could die and it's harmful. But when we look at this, all of the amendments, all of the pieces of the Constitution, and everything that's written by our founding fathers was to make us a more perfect union. It was for us to become a nation. We knew what was happening, that we were running away from, and from Great Britain, but it was so that we could become a more perfect union. And even though blacks were not considered a part of that conversation at the time, they did draft something called the 13th Amendment, which said, you know what, we're not going to make a difference, and we're going to abolish slavery. And then they came with these civil rights acts and these movements. So when I look at this, and I think about freedom of speech and that it is a part of our Constitution, I think that anything that does not make us a more perfect union is against the First Amendment. Now, Mark, I'm going to let you give me your thoughts about that.
It's the same comment I said before. Who decides that? So, like, I mean, take the simple example, Nazis. I think we all universally, well, not other than the Nazis, everyone else is against the Nazis.
Right.
Despite that, court after court has upheld their right to be able to go have marches,
which I never understand, but okay, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And it's back to, like, pornography. Is that for a more perfect union? A more perfect union? Who decides what's pornographic? And it's back to, like, it's just one person's what they find offensive or hurtful is different than another. And how do you decide, okay, that word is offensive or not, or how? And so we can't say it.
Right. Well, so my thought is that I agree with you, who becomes a censorship police, but the idea then becomes, who is what we're saying denigrating to another American. And when we come to a place that we are denigrating another American, I have every right to my freedom of speech. I want to smoke until my lungs collapse. But you know why they stopped us from smoking inside of buildings? Because my freedom to smoke does not overtake your freedom to have clear lungs. And since we share common spaces, we have to look at the individual's freedoms not being, when he's taken away or being infringed upon. And so I think that everyone, if you want to go out there, and this is, we were joking, and this is a joke. Do you mind me saying this, Mark?
No, go ahead.
Mark,
if you don't think I'm going to get like lots of hate mail, you can say that.
We were here talking, and this comes up all the time, Mark. Somebody asks, I don't understand why black people can say the N-word and white people can't say the N-word. And my guy, I can't remember what his name is, but anyways, he used to live next door to Jay Rich out in Oakland. I can't remember the actor's name, but he was on a TV show on Fox, and he says, go ahead and say it. They're like, we can't say it. He's like, no, go ahead and say it. And the reality is you can say it. Joe Rogan says it. He said it, and
look what happens.
And he got $100 million. Well, no, but what happened was this, and I think that it's interesting, and it goes back to, in our country, capitalism is king. And so if he thinks that he's going to be censored on Spotify, what happens? A right-wing podcast company comes along, Rumble, and they say, hey, we'll pay you $100 million to leave, and you don't have to worry about censoring. We're not censoring anything. Why? Because we want you to fly off it. Number 45 became president because he bet on the fact that controversy sells. And if you watch TV enough, and if you have, and that's what I'm going to tell you, and people, I tell people this all the time. What I loved about Donald Trump was that the guy that we got on TV that was so fun to watch and so hilarious was exactly the same guy we got in the White House. No, unfortunately. But I'm going to tell you, I'm one of those persons who's going to tell you just, Donald's
if you're
like,
Hillary Clinton, though, how do you wake up every morning and look in the mirror and go, I lost to this guy?
well, it's classic politics. And I think that people were tired of classic politics until some of the rhetoric that he was putting out there and some of the people that he was endorsing. I was thinking like, hey, let's vote in a candidate. Let's go for Donald Trump.
So
but
did you vote for Donald Trump?
I didn't. No.
Okay.
Donald couldn't get my vote. But he could have, had he stayed away from the sexism, because that was the thing that got me like, whoa, we can have a president who believes just grab him by the, that was a little different for me, and then the issues of race came like after that. But I had seen Donald Trump, All-Star Weekend, New York, around athletes and around people. And so I was really kind of like this, Nene Leakes and other people had been around this guy and they're like, this isn't who he is. But, we play to what sells. And in America, the green dollar or cryptocurrency, whichever you decide is going to move forward, is what sells. But I want to encourage you guys to continue to stay in tune with us on this conversation. As we go forward, we will continue to talk about these issues in America that America seems to not be able to have intellectual conversations on. Marcus going to be here so that we can have those conversations, hard conversations, and we're going to give each other space for grace in this space. If we don't understand, or if we say something that's offensive, we'll give each other a moment to clarify, and we're going to allow love to be the thing that brings us back together. Love will keep you together, and we'll have great conversations. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week with more United Shades of Gray.